Okay. Agenda item number 3 is the presentation of the governor's executive budget. If we could get it on the.
Good morning, members, and we'll certainly entertain questions when we're finished the presentation, and ask your indulgence as we run through the executive budget as the governor is proposed. He was unable to be here with us this morning and asked that I give you his regard. What we're going to present to you today, and we've had this discussion the prior 2 years, is our third, if you will, standstill budget, and standstill, not to the penny standstill as bankers like to do. But as you clearly understand, when we are working with the revenue that the REC allows us to work with, and looking at the existing agency budgets, it is our attempt to go back and pull out any one-time adjustments that were made, out of baseline funding if we need to do that, all the while making adjustments for increased utilization, whether that be at prisons, whatever the case may be. Any items required by federal law that may have changed. And of course, for years, with your cooperation, we have attempted for a number of years now, certainly not to fund recurring items with non-recurring revenue, and we have avoided that in this budget presentation as well. So I just mentioned that as a standstill. Before we talk numbers, I did want to mention to you, I feel like there's been a few questions as it relates to our efforts on savings. If you would remember, back when the governor was inaugurated in January of 24, a few weeks after that, he issued an executive order asking the executive departments to identify as many efficiency savings as they could that would directly affect state general fund. And I'm not sure if it was because we were all new agency heads and we took him very seriously. We did a very productive run in those first few months of 24. What that did, and we were able to affect a lot of those changes when we came back to you with the 26 budget presentation last year to incorporate a standstill recommendation based on what I would estimate to be in the $250 million range, items that we were not going to refund again, which I think certainly aided in your ability to offer the teachers the one-time stipend that they are receiving as we speak. So from the official DOGE, LA DOGE effort had not begun in 24 yet. It came later in the year. But I only mentioned those first-year savings to you because they were significant. We did some in the division. There were agencies that, whether it was leases that weren't renewed, changed, contracts that weren't renewed or canceled, whatever the case may be, it came in all shapes and sizes, vehicles, whatever it was. We incorporated that certainly into our 25 request. With the LA DOGE exercise, that became a lot more formalized in late 24, and of course for their work they did during 25. And you will see reports continue to come forth on the results of those efforts. They had the press conference last week to announce their savings on state general fund, which is what I wanted to clarify with you guys, which is where we focus and what we're approving today in the executive budget and moving forward is only what affects the state general fund. That estimate that DOGE came up with was in the $300 million range. What I wanted to explain to you is that for the division's purposes has continued to be incorporated. This will be a 3-year step. So whatever savings were identified in 25's exercise, we are going to take some of those into consideration as we present this 27 budget to you today. And, sitting with the agency saying this is on your list, when is this going to happen? We intend to incorporate it. Can you live without the dollars going forward? All of those discussions happens with the agencies. So I just wanted to clear that, when they reference a $300 million savings, we didn't deposit that to a fund to go tap one day. we have incorporated it, which is allowing us to do a third year of standstill budgeting. If we needed to entertain that without that today, I would be asking you for 250 to 300 million more dollars to add to the executive budget. We're not having to do that by us incorporating those savings as we move along. And with the governor's announcement of the Inspector General's office also taking on the role of optimization and efficiency, I think we can expect that going forward. I mean, we are sitting at a really unique time in our cycle, and it's thanks to you guys helping us stick with this standstill budget. I think you recognize the importance of it. More importantly, it has come without a reduction in services. It's come without a reduction in workforce at the state employee level. We do, have tough discussions with agencies when a TO is vacant for more than a year. So we have continued to do that work. I say that to you because if you look at the 5-year and you see what the revenue does over the next couple of fiscal years, I think these savings are going to come more and more important. Now, vehicle sales tax is a decision that everyone made and made it appropriately, but we lose that revenue out of the state general fund beginning in the next budget cycle. So, these savings, how we incorporate them, with constitutional amendments coming up on the ballot in May, you have a pretty significant inventory one, and you have a pretty significant teacher, the payoff of the teacher retirement debt. Both of those pass. We'll work through the financials of it. Both of those fail. We'll be in the last 3 weeks of the session. The election is May 16th. So there is an ability to make those adjustments. And I think this standstill allows us to have that ability to maneuver up and down as we need to. So I'll only ask you, bear with us as we walk through this, because I think we are appreciating the effect that it has had on the state general fund. To do a third year of standstill is only happening because we have this $250 million ability that you were able to use with the stipend. We'll see how we can use it today. Hopefully what we present to you is something you can agree with, and certainly we may be adjusting after the constitutional amendments on May 16th. One of the things I wanted to mention to you that while all this is going on, our agency heads have done a tremendous amount of work. They weren't wild about the exercise. I think everybody, to stop what you're doing and go, search your department from top to bottom for efficiencies is not usually on the daily calendar. So thank you to the agency heads for participating in that. But you've seen what inflation does. In fact, you'll see in the budget today what we're asking for to backfill in departments like corrections and DCFS with medical supplies. We're required to do medical care for juveniles and adults that are incarcerated. That medical inflation has taken a toll on these agencies. So they have been bearing the brunt of escalated cost while we're also asking them to keep a standstill budget. They make for interesting conversations on some days, I will tell you. So I put all this out to you because as we go through this, you will see where, corrections may have come forth with a great contract and a lease that they no longer want to do that was going to save them $10 million. But you'll see in here, I need to backfill them an exceptional amount of money for overtime, their inability to hire folks to work a lot of the nighttime shifts. And of course, we have funded their overtime since my early days in the legislature. So their DCFS, we cannot predict the utilization of who shows up at the front doors of those departments. If you have the opportunity to visit with Secretary Harris and DCFS, that agency with the movement of SNAP back to LDH, there has been an incredibly good remaking of the Department of Children and Family Services that I think they will agree focuses on services to children without a lot of the other noise going on in the department. It's been an impressive redesign. We would have ordinarily been giving them a great deal more money than we're giving them today. We do have to backfill a little bit because of the SNAP transfer, but we'll talk about that. But I think all of those things happening, while inflation is putting pressure, speaks highly to the agencies, and it speaks highly to you helping us support this as we go forward. So thank you for that. Real quick, I'll run through. I think Colleen went through the revenue estimates. What we are working with today is $12,616,000 in the revenue that we're dealing with today. If you look at the graph on page 4, what you see next year is a $260 million estimated drop. Again, primarily with what Colleen mentioned in vehicle sales tax and the beginning of some of the income tax reductions that were offered. The 5-year forecast on page 5 just exacerbates it a little bit because we put the rise in inflation and what it will do to expenses. That expense line certainly can change, but this is kind of worst case scenario spending with inflation. That gap gets pretty wide open. I think you get to see this every month as we do the fiscal status, but I just wanted to share those graphs with you. As we get into the particulars in the budget, I'll let Colleen cover some of the details with you, and then we'll come back on letting you know some of the bigger items that we've included in the governor's budget, and then we'll talk more about specifics and if you have questions at that point. So, Colleen, I'll let you take that part.
So this slide just represents a high-level overview of the budget adjustments that we made for FY27. You can see the total budget is going down by $3.1 billion. And just to explain what the header means, it says without double counts and with carry forwards. So we took out double counts, which includes interagency transfers, which is payments agencies make to other agencies, so you don't see them twice. And just as a general double count, an example from this past year is the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund. There was $965 million that was deposited into that fund and then transferred to other funds. So we're only counting that once. So you're not going to see the revenue stabilization share and then the other share within the other statutory dedications. So it's a more accurate picture of how the budget is actually changing. And we do have carry forwards in this number. The total carry forward number for that was carried forward from FY25 into FY26 was about $2 billion, and the general fund portion was around $452 million. So a large portion of the change in state general fund is taking out the carry forwards, which was the $452 million, but this change is offset by various increases, including statewide increases. We funded replacement acquisitions and major repairs. That was $106 million, and then there's additional increases that we'll touch on later in the presentation. Statutory dedications are being reduced by $1.7 billion. The biggest change for this was non-recurring, the Revenue Stabilization Trust Fund appropriation that we had in FY26. The water sector fund went down. We took out the carry forwards. That was $182 million. And then the over collections fund that was used to fund the teacher stipends for $25 million, we backed that out. These reductions, again, will be offset by increases that we'll get to in a little bit. Federal funds, the change of $1.1 billion, that's mostly attributable to carry forwards. That was $1.2 billion, and it's being offset by Louisiana Department of Health has the Rural Health Transformation Grant, which is a new grant that they'll be receiving in the current fiscal year, and we added $175 million in federal authority for that in FY27. This next slide, this shows how the state budget is changing without double counts and without carry forwards. So you can see the total budget is going down $1 billion after we're taking out the $2 billion for carry forwards.
So if you look at page 9, and we always like to kind of graphically display the historical state general fund trend on the one on page 9. If you're looking at the second line from the bottom on the graph, which is SGF, this is probably a talking point that you need to keep in your wheelhouse, because that is an exceptionally flat line over the years. And even with the increase in federal funds at several spikes, as you can see, with Katrina Rita, Medicaid expansion, COVID funding, when we're going down from 12.7 to 12.6 in this year is incredible. Now, everything added together is the orange line at the top, which is including the federal funds. And if you flip over to page 10, we've separated it by means of finance. So you can see the IATs, the fees and self-generated, the stat deads, the SGF, and of course the total at the top, including the Fed funds. The part that you have the most influence on being the state general fund, again, a reasonably flat line, no big dips and mountains in it, as is the case with what we do with IETs and fees and self-generated. I think the legislature has always been very cognizant of the fees and self-generated. So, even in times of inflation and pressure that we're receiving, these lines remaining constant is something we need to remind our constituents that we are being good stewards of their money despite inflationary pressure and lots of things going on, and use these graphs if you need to. Now, our federal partners, that's also our money as well. I don't want to ignore that part. But there are great federal programs at times of disaster that we depend heavily on. So we certainly don't turn down those efforts. But at the same time, being very, very careful not to let state general fund creep up with it. Otherwise, these graphs would look totally different. And that's where your discipline comes in, and we thank you for that. If you look at the breakdown, I always like to remind members, from the state general fund perspective, between K through 12, higher ed, which is the educational component, and the healthcare component, we're well hitting in the high 70s, 80% of the state general fund to those three areas. K through 12, of course, lots of great gains there. Funding with the whole MFP helps us predict and stabilize what that funding looks like. Healthcare with our new team at LDH, we've been able to get our arms around it. As Colleen mentioned, a new $175 million grant that is going to be really interesting. Met with them yesterday to talk about what that could do for rural healthcare and the opportunities there. Pretty exciting information there as well. If you go to the next one, it's just the same breakdown, but as it relates to total budget, and as you would imagine, because of the federal component of healthcare, it takes up a big part of the total budget, and the separation there on all the other agencies. Just pretty good information to see graphically if you care to dig into it deeper. So we'll talk about some of the major items funded. I'll let Colleen go through some of them. We'll hop back and forth on some of the ones and what the priorities were that we have included in the budget, and then we'll expand on them a little bit as we go through.
So this first slide looks at means of finance substitutions that we made. There was a total increase to state general fund of $86.5 million. This is mostly attributable in state police. We swapped out $30 million from the Riverboat Gaming Enforcement Fund and $11 million in their fees and self-generated revenues. Both of these are mostly a result of just statewide costs increasing throughout the department. And the Louisiana Department of Health, we have the SNAP administrative cost share change that Representative Amity asked about earlier. Beginning on October 1st, 2026, the state share is increasing from 50% to 75%. In wildlife and fisheries, we have a substitution of $8.5 million, and that's just mostly attributable, again, to statewide costs increasing. In higher education, the TOPS fund, based on the latest REC forecast, we had to substitute $4.4 million of general fund to fully fund that program. And these are just focusing on increases, but there's also decreases throughout the budget as well that will offset that amount.
On page 14, if you look at that graph, of course, it's always been a priority of Governor Landry to expand our Gator program as we have the dollars available to do so. We've included $44.2 million in this budget for LA Gator. Keep in mind you have what was traditionally the former, the original agreement to whether it was $50 million or what the number is over the years on our voucher program, our traditional voucher program. This will add $44.2 million to that. So if you're using the $50 million number, this would give it a 94. 80 to $90 million available for applications for LA Gator. In speaking with Department of Education, they feel like there are certainly ample available seats as those applications come in. They anticipate a number of applications. As you recall, we removed this part of the funding last year in the effort to work with the teacher stipend. But as we go forward, I think the interest still remains that they will have several applications to work through this next tranche, if you will, of dollars for LA Gator. He thinks they'll have enough applications to exhaust it all, and he feels confident that we have the seats to do that. So the governor and the superintendent support this addition to the budget, and we hope that transpires. Louisiana Economic Development, I don't think we need to spend a great deal of time. You have been very supportive of their efforts. The High Impact Jobs Program, which is the first time we will include funding for that program, and if you recall, in a lot of the remake of the incentives as you enhance the whole LED opportunity, I think the legislature made a commitment at that point as some of those incentives that they used to attract business were being shaved, redesigned, going away, that there would be opportunities that the legislature would offer funds to allow them to compete accordingly, and the high impact jobs program is one of those. The governor agreed to put $75 million in the budget toward that. I think keep in mind as we get to our supplemental needs later in the session, we will make a recommendation for additional money for LED because you still have site development and all those other things that they use in recruitment. This is in particularly to the high impact jobs with, as you recall, the historic jobs program that we had before, quality jobs, still exist, but maybe not as competitive as we thought it was back in the day. And certainly if you have questions about that, we can get someone from LED to the table. But the $75 million for high impact jobs is included. DCFS, one of the recommendations through that remodel of the department, if you will, was a need for a modernization system in their programming. I think this is one of those where whether it was a result of SNAP being transferred to LDH or savings that the department was able to find, definitely encourage us to offer this $12 million to DCFS to work toward a modernization system. There will be a second recommendation that we'd ask that you consider possibly in the funds bill for digitizing their records in the department as well. So it's these kinds of, hopefully, technology investments that we can make as we work through these savings. And this is one of the examples of reinvestment, if you will, to hopefully produce some future savings going forward with this modernization effort as well.
This next slide, the first item that it's discussing is at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. It's funding an increase of about 688 offenders. This will also add an additional 150 positions to support those offenders. Angola is currently seeing increases in their population right now, and so this is to get them to be where they think they will be. In local housing of state offenders, it's funding the $3 increase to the per diem. It's to continue the one-time increase that they got last year in anticipation of potential law changes to adjust their rates from $26.39 to $29.39. In Board of Regents, there's additional funding recommended to increase the MJ Foster Scholarship Program by $14.5 million. This will bring the total funding level to $25 million. And so far in this school year, the program has supported over 7,500 students. The next two items are related to LDH. The first is the typical managed care organization adjustment that adjusts for the annual rate changes for the MCOs, as well as accounts for utilization, enrollments, pharmacy rebates, and premium tax changes. The nursing home inflationary adjustment is the adjustment we make in non-rebase years. FY26 was a rebase year, so this year is the inflationary adjustment. And the last adjustment on this slide is for Board of Regents. It's for their START system, and they're currently on a system older than 20 years, and it houses almost 90,000 accounts, so this would just be an upgrade to that system. This next slide looks at State General Fund, and the changes, it's in the highest to lowest order by the amount of changes in each department. Most of the increases are due to the means of finance substitutions we mentioned earlier. LDH is the first one, but most of this is made up. They have 86 different adjustments. It's a total increase of 2.8% to LDH's budget. They have various means of financing substitutions, the nursing home inflation, the MCO adjustment, and the Early Childhood Supports and Services Initiative. Corrections is similar to the increases we just spoke about, and the commissioner mentioned earlier the increase at the Louisiana State Penitentiary, increases to offender medical cost, overtime, supplies, operating services. Youth services is similar. Public safety is attributable to the MOF swaps that we mentioned earlier as well.
So we talked about the surplus earlier of $577 million. Just wanted to clarify the two available pots of dollars that you'll be dealing with. Also, the excess or the supplemental, if you will, for the current year being at $292,589,000. We'll talk about a little bit about, of course, the available uses of the surplus. Colleen shared with you earlier about the 5 areas that it can be spent. Just as a reminder today, well, as of December 31st anyway, the Budget Stabilization Fund with a balance of $1.23 billion, the Revenue Stabilization Fund balance at $2.3 billion, accounts for, roughly $4.5 billion in our savings accounts. I mentioned that to you because I mentioned this at our Doge press conference last week, that myself and the treasurer have the ability about 3 times a year to interview with our rating agencies as it relates to our bond indebtedness, and they are certainly probably listening to us today, looking at what our future looks like over the years, but it is truly the underwriting of our credit standing with Wall Street. As a rule of thumb, 25% of our state general fund should be what's in our savings account. We are there with the $4 billion that we have today, and it gets the attention of our rating agencies. They like that a lot. They like that we have mechanisms to continue to make deposits to those savings accounts. So it doesn't go without fail that it does. If they lower our ratings, if they increase our ratings, lower our risk, it costs us less money when we borrow money, which we do a lot in HB2. So it is goodness when we have these rainy day balances and these revenue stabilization balances. As you're aware, the revenue stabilization formula will change somewhat, but it is important that we focus on those savings account balances, and it's a great position in where we sit today. On the surplus, we put this in every year to remind you that half of the money that's of the $577 million, 25% required to go into the rainy day, the other 25% into the unfunded accrued liability. The remaining $288 million, historically what we've done is sit with DOTD, CPRA, and the capital outlay program and determine how we divide that $288 million. We will likely spend a great deal of this in the Highway Priority Program. I think rather than chewing up supplemental money or other money to do it, this would be appropriate. A lot of those projects are in capital outlay anyway. We'll be likely making that recommendation. We'll talk more with you and of course with your leadership when we get to the funds bill at the appropriate time in the session. But I just wanted to mention to you things that we would consider very appropriate and the governor would be certainly interested in including in the supplemental bill. Our voting technology fund, as you know, our Secretary of State continues to work toward a new system. She is very close to making a decision on a vendor. We have I think for the last 2 years, put 20 million into the fund. She is saying that she doesn't necessarily need 20 million this time. 10 would put her in good position, depending on the vendor she picks, to move quickly. So we would recommend maybe a $10 million deposit into the voting technology fund. Like I mentioned earlier, the LED project commitments, with the money that you have put in there in the last couple of years, we were able to do the commitments to Meta to a degree, but in a large way to the steel plant in Ascension, with infrastructure assistance, with the site development, a lot of capital outlay involved in that project as well. And then, of course, we continue in our Office of Technology Services to work with every agency on any IT modernization that we can offer. We have several agencies that have not changed their main operating systems in a number of years. One big one, compliments to a lot of your help, is what you will see transform at the Office of Motor Vehicles, that touches about 3 million of our 4 million people if you're above 16 years old. The experience at OMV had a lot to be desired, no doubt, when we arrived. It is a huge conversion to this new system, but it will be exceptionally user-friendly, and we've been pleased with the conversion thus far. So, those types of modernization projects, we will always be looking to invest at the appropriate time when we can, with the available dollars allowed. That's the high points. I'd be happy to take any questions. I would, before we lose, this was Colleen Gill, our director's first stab at the executive budget. She's an old pro. I can't call it her first stab. It's her first stab being the lead. But she and her team did a phenomenal job. We thanks for your assistance and, of course, the leadership's help in running items by them. So we're happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, Commissioner Barra, I do appreciate your efforts and the concerted effort that continues to work with the governor's office and administration in preparing and hopefully passing and adopting, working with the Senate and the rest of the members throughout the legislature to have a standstill budget that allows us to control the growth of government, but also allows us to fund those programs that are not just expected, but necessary for our constituents here in Louisiana. First question is President Pro Temp Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say thank you to both of you. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner and Madam, look, new old pro, right? Welcome, and certainly this was a great presentation. My question, I have two questions. So number one, going back to the modernization, not just for DCFS, but for all the departments, are they working with our Office of Technology as they are coming up and planning moving forward in this area?
Correct. A couple of different ways. As they put forth a project or desire for a project, certainly helping them evaluate vendors from our OTS area, but also making recommendations on ways to implement, the speed at which they implement, and then certainly when it gets to that point, kind of hand-holding through the implementation.
I think that's real important because you may be familiar with some of the balls that have dropped in the past, and we have lost a lot of money with this whole technology piece, especially with the Department of Children and Family Services, right, where we made that great investment and right, didn't get the yield that we expected.
I think that department will shine brightly here shortly. We've some great changes there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that they are working with our Office of Technology. I've met with the secretary there, and I think that she has a lot to bring to the table. My next question would be, as it relates to the Department of Children and Family Services, when we look at other states, what percentage, and I don't know if you know this offhand, but how much of their budget do they actually commit to that department? Because I'm going to tell you, I know I've stated it before, but it really stood out to me this time when I looked at page 11. And when I look at every category, that is the lowest category in terms of appropriations on behalf of the state. And to me, it's the greatest component as it relates to the foundation of our state when we talk about children and family. So I want to challenge us, this entire, not just you guys, but us as well, to begin to alter our level of priorities so that we are strengthening our family and children. Because I think when we do this, the cost in all the other areas will naturally go down because we don't have to invest as much because we did it on the front end. But it really stood out to me that it's 2.1%, and I don't know what other states do. I look forward to having another conversation with you at a later date, but I do want to challenge us to begin to look at that and how we can begin to change those numbers around where we invest in more at the foundation and making sure, because when we have strong families, we have strong communities, which yields to a strong state.
Well, and if you notice, the 12 million that we included in the budget for their modernization, and they can certainly speak to the details of it, but the whole idea is getting the employees in DCFS the right information to really service the children at the end of the day. If that's getting stuff on their iPhones more readily, whatever the case may be with the modernization, it is in the whole purpose is to improve delivery. And that's been, the challenge at that department for many years, as you well know. So this first 12 million is an effort to begin that process, no doubt.
I think that's a good start, but going forward, and this is just to all of my colleagues as well, we need to look at how we alter that number, because 2.1%, and I'm going to be really curious to see how other states actually do that, like what percentage of their budget actually go to that department.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, President Pro Tem. Commissioner Bauer, in light of what President Pro Tem Bauer was discussing, I want to remind members that there's been a lot of moving parts to the budget in the last year. For an example, around $150 million from SNAPs that now we're accustomed to that operating under DCFS that now operates under LDH. Part of TANF has been moved from DCFS into LDH, as well as the disability determination.
Correct.
So I think that if, and I'm interested as well, I don't know how other states do it. Maybe they are doing it a different way. Maybe they're doing it what we're doing now and is moving more of those parts of DCFS that we've traditionally recognized as a part of that agency over to their Department of Health as well. Representative Freiberg for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all the hard work you've done. This is a magnificent presentation, and in a way we can all appreciate the information. I'm just curious about the repairs to this building. Where does that money come from, and what kind of budget item is that? Because it seems like that would be in here because it's got to be a big price tag, I would think.
It is definitely a big price tag, and it is a significant, probably the most significant repair work we'll do to the building from its original construction. And I'll let Matt Baker with facility planning walk you through that.
Okay.
But the budget number is significant, correct?
Yeah, the approximate budget for that project is around $110 million right now, and we've signed a contract with the contractor who's currently working outside for approximately $96 million. That is not being provided for all in 1 year. It's approximately a $30 million a year cash flow for that project over the course of about 4.5 to 5 years. It's being provided through capital outlay, and that funding is a mix of both general obligation bonds and general fund.
Well, when I was looking at capital outlay and deferred maintenance, I was wondering, I'm surprised. I would have thought it might be more than that. So we're looking at about $30 million, maybe a little more than that a year out of general operations and maintenance, deferred maintenance.
It'd be a combination of general fund and bonds, but around $30
bonds,
million a
okay.
year.
Well, and Matt, if you could just describe for their benefit kind of the major parts of what's happening. It includes window replacement as well.
So this is a multi-phase project that's been going on for about 12 years, starting with phase one on the north side of the Capitol to the center of the building, and then phase two was the rehabilitation of the north sides of the House and Senate chambers. This is phase three, and it's by far the largest phase that we've done. It is to rehabilitate the shaft of the tower and the lantern at the top of the tower. And so what we're doing is going through floor 6 through the lantern, and every floor you're going to see scaffolding is going to be erected around the entire tower, and we're going to rehone every stone, clean every stone. Each window is going to have its metal laser cleaned. The windows, the glazing will be changed, new solar film added, steel that's been damaged by water intrusion over the last approximately century will be repaired under there. And so we're going back and all of the mortar will be changed out. So it's a comprehensive rehabilitation of the building itself, and it'll allow it to last into the next century. So, but this is by far the largest phase, and it'll make a huge impact on the skyline of Baton Rouge. I don't think anyone has seen the building clean in our lifetimes. So,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, next person, Representative Tarver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first time to be on this committee, so wanted to start by just thanking you for your service, Mr. Commissioner. I've never really had a chance to visit with you much, but I know you've been around serving as speaker and doing a lot of work, good work over the years. So thank you for today's efforts. But I have two. I would think they would be explanations more than questions. Really, you kind of alluded to one in the typical question that guys in my coffee shop and around my next neighborhood, they want to know. We saved $1 billion, and we have a standstill budget. That I know you can you talked a little bit about it, but could you just simply answer that question for the just average person who wants to know? Well, how did that work like that?
Right. Well, and the distinction quickly is the source of the funds, and the $1 billion is in the federal bucket, which we don't vote on, we don't control. We give the authority to spend the money is really all we have in that regard. Like in the case of $175 million grant coming to LDH, doesn't cost the state any money to accept it. We will help them administer that grant going forward. So there is some cost involved in administering that grant. I would say if they agree to accept it, which I think is a given. But all of those federal components, whether it be what goes to DOE, what goes to higher ed, what goes to LDH, the SNAP benefits, those kinds of things. So when funding formulas at the federal government change, or we recommend that we want to do something different with one of those federal programs, then that federal funding number changes. And what you saw in the billion, which I didn't spend a whole lot of time with on the federal component, but was a lot of those adjustments that were recommended to be made. And that's where that $1 billion in Fed fund savings originated from. What we deal with here and what y'all vote on in House Bill 1 is truly only what the $12 billion of state general fund effect, and that savings number was more $300 million. So from a Louisiana taxpayer perspective, when it comes to the Louisiana taxes you pay, that is state general fund. I quickly remind people, so is the federal bucket, because we also file federal returns as well. So I don't mean to discount the federal component. It's our wheelhouse is the state general fund, but it is significant that if there is something at the federal level that we choose not to do. Some of these are grants that we're not required to accept unless we want them. In the case of disasters, we get those grants to help us rebuild because we certainly don't have the state general fund to do it on our own. So it's a combination of things when it comes to the federal component. And I agree with you. I get the same question. So where'd the $1 billion go? Well, it's just money we are, no longer receiving or that we're receiving newly from the federal government. But that was kind of the explanation of the bill. And there's certainly, when those reports are finalized and produced, you will be able to see the breakdown of what does that. The same thing with the $300 million on state general fund. We are already incorporating probably 200 or more of that into these standstill budgets, which has been a great advantage. And one of the reasons I think the governor chose to continue forward with the efficiency and optimization effort in the Inspector General's office is to be able to keep that momentum going. That, periodically we do need agencies to double check their leases, double check their vehicles. It's a good exercise once every few years anyway. This will be an ongoing way to keep that rolling. So yeah, it is difficult to explain in the different pockets of money. But that's the kind of the best explanation I can give at this point.
That's excellent. I think you did a good job of that. The second only other thing I was curious about is we talk a lot about inflation. And sometimes we feel like inflation is kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'd like to know your thoughts about, or maybe an explanation about, there's expected inflation and then there's real inflation. And I think you hinted on one of those items, which is that when you're buying medical supplies for prisoners, for example, if I understand what you were saying, there's a higher cost attached to that today than there was 3 years ago or 5 years ago. But then there's also the inflation component that we kind of extrapolate into the thinking, and maybe sometimes that's the one we should be thinking less about and trying to restrain more than the real ones. Could you just kind of talk about that a little bit in the budget
Yeah,
planning?
and it's a hard comparison to make, but if you put it in just strictly pure terms, let's say the inflation rate that, the feds say is happening is 3.5%. It's just assumed that most people expect things to go up 3.5%. When in reality, if you're dealing with a specific drug, a specific medical supply, in fact, those price increases could be greater than that. This is an average inflation number that the feds release. So when whether we're going out to bid for medical supplies or whatever we're doing in that particular instance, you may have some spikes that are larger than that. And that's the disappointing thing, because that's on product purchases. As we borrow money, as we go into the capital outlay bill and issue bonds, you have those interest rates making those changes as well based on inflation rates that are discussed. So you're right, there's a perceived and then there's a real, depending on the product that you're buying. Building materials went through that for a while. I think we're seeing it on both prescription drugs and medical supplies in a big way now. Yep.
Good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
All right. Next question, Senator Boudreaux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I would like to get an invite from you and Rep. Tarver at the coffee shops while y'all talking about them $1 billion. I'd like to sit in on some of those conversations and see how we can divvy up some more things for the state. I got two items that don't necessarily expect an answer today. So you included $44 million for the Gator Fund, and you talked a little bit about the voucher. So I have a lot of Gator people in my area that just call and wanted money. And we also have a lot of critical schools in the Acadiana area that depended on the voucher. We were told last year that we would have to promulgate new rules and do this, and the Gator program would take care of the vouchers. And that's, you're the messenger today. I need to see it. I need to see how the voucher program will not fall through the cracks with $44 million going into that. And those schools who have depended before Gator was in the water, they were going to be taken care of by the state. That is our responsibility. And we're supposed to have a presentation, so this is the warning. I'm waiting to see what exactly we have changed from last year to get to that point. My second point is as we've made these changes in the agencies between DCFS and LDH, and that big bill that everybody knows everything that was in, the work requirements for those beneficiaries, how is that going to be taken care of, and at what cost and impact? And we've talked about it at the state level for a number of years, that we want able bodies going to work, doing the right thing. My question is going to be, as we go through finance hearings and everything, let's quantify that. We all on board with saying how great we need to do these things, but I would like at the end of the day to come back and say, this is what we got. And I know it came down from the feds, but that's going to be a cost associated with that, and that it concerns me. And when, Senator Barrow was talking earlier about priorities and where additional dollars, when we start, and Rep. Tarver hit it on it also, the different pots of money, sometimes we lose sight of it's all dollars. So those are the two that I would like you to put on your radar, and more discussion to come. But I do want to be clear. I have both, gate and voucher, but we can't close down one and build up another one until we're sure they're both going to work and those kids don't fall through the cracks. Certainly. So thank you and the team for your presentation today, and I look forward to details on that.
Yeah, so real quick, on traditional voucher, what exists in the DOE budget today is $43 million for what was traditional voucher as we knew it. They will still accept and renew those applications every year for the income level that qualified for the traditional voucher. The second pot of money, which is what we're adding here today, which is the $44 million, would be for the next available category, which there's still an income restriction. It's a little bit more lenient to let families with multiple children qualify. Opens up a couple of different application portals, including new kindergarten students and that kind of thing. So when you move to the second category of who is eligible, it increases a few more that are beginning to be eligible. That's what the second round of the $44 million would help fund. So there should be really no change in the traditional voucher as long as those folks reapply and still qualify. There would be no change there. What this opens the door to is to a few more families still with income restrictions, but with multiple children or first-time kindergartners type thing. And DOE could do a much better job than I just did, but that's roughly.
Thank you for that. And I just want to put it on the record that is the concern. Sure. And we had the discussions last year, and
correct.
We need to finish it.
Yeah, and on LDH, I will tell you this, on the work requirement piece, I do know, and the secretary couldn't be with us this morning, but there is a concerted effort on the work requirement. There is actually some dedicated employees in LDH that are going to help transition that requirement into the department. I assuming there will be some cost to that, and the federal component should have included that. But I do know two folks in particular that have, recently been added to the staff to focus on the work requirement transition.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
All right, next question, Representative Turner.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Thanks for having Act 751 up there. Trust me, I've already started working on that and trying to secure things. So,
Super.
I was wondering if there's any talk or anything going on additional investment for the HERO Fund, because that is a huge job component and economic development for every community here. Something we all need, and wonder if there's any more investment we're putting toward that.
Yeah, I mean, as we go through MJ Foster, Patriot Act, HERO Fund, I think I was, overloading the governor as we went through that master list of many opportunities there. There is certainly interest in all of them. We're trying to, where last year I think we funded Patriot, this time we did a little bit more to MJ Foster. It seems like the response to the adults returning to school has been popular. They will run out of their allocation for this current year soon if they haven't run out already. So we're trying to go where the need looks like it is, and I know HERO is considered. So, whether it be a one-time from the supplemental bill or whatever could be appropriate, but that would be a consideration. We did include it. We didn't have enough to spread around to everybody, but certainly something that we would continue to support. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, last question, Senator Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is this the best for last?
Well, I waited till push my button at the very end, so it would be last. No, just a little follow-up. On the MFP, I see the $175 million. I can't remember in the previous years. Has it been going down like that? What's the explanation on the $175 million reduction in MFP?
Non-recurring the teacher stipend.
That's what now?
Non-recurring the teacher stipend. It's not impacting the MFP payments to the locals. The teacher stipend was funded
Oh, I
past
see what you're
3
talking
years,
about.
and that's the
Okay.
general fund portion of it that's coming out.
Okay, so if we give a okay, so that means just taking out the stipend we gave last year.
Correct.
Okay, I understand. I was thinking it might have been a reduction in students or whatever. So, okay, thank you for that explanation. That was quick, Chairman McFarland, very quick.
Actually, I do got another question, President Henry.
Real on the Gator funding, we're doing the first 43 is for the voucher kids who got it last year, right?
Correct.
And that's 100% of that money goes toward tuition.
Correct.
This
Or is there, I think there is some tutoring opportunities and a couple of things in there.
well, those are the things that I want to run down. The other things that are in there, because the second round of money, the children getting that don't have to leave the school they're currently attending, correct? They can stay in that school and still receive the Gator funding, correct?
They would have had to, I think, been enrolled in a public school prior or entering kindergarten. There's a few different qualifications for each of the different priorities. So I think the priority one is the traditional voucher children, and they would have the access to the first tranche of money, if you will. And then you start looking at the different income levels, and then it starts, the different eligibility requirements change. If you're entering kindergarten, if you're leaving a public school and going to a private school. So I think you have to be leaving the public system, going into the private system.
Are we sure on that? Are we,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they weren't able to be here this morning because we requested them to be here to.
I would imagine
answer
they.
those
Yeah,
questions.
that's gonna. Well, I have a
Correct.
strange feeling they'll have that opportunity. The second thing is on the other services that you mentioned. That's the part that we're still trying to run down, because if you receive the funding, and it's not just tutoring, it's a portal that is set up to where people can use those dollars to purchase literally whatever's in that portal, which could be related to education. But definitely, I don't believe they're required to leave. In some circumstances, they're not required to even use the money for tuition. They can use it all for services. Could that be possible?
I think so. In fact, I think there may even be an equipment component to it as well. I mean,
So at some point in time, like this is the recap of last year when we started it, and we said the reason I didn't like Gator is because every year it has to double, right? And lo and behold, this year it doubled.
Right.
So next year, what is it more likely to do again? Double again, right? The number is going to continue to double. Yet when we're focused on literally education, like taking a child from a bad school and putting him in a good school, which we're fine with, some of the money doesn't even require to have to go to tuition. It can go to just whatever services a child may need that assumes they're currently not getting them through the health insurance or a local company now, and they can just go on a portal that you and I don't control to get the services. So the funding mechanism of this is much bigger than the bullet points which we talk in, we're going to take a kid, and there's some grammar school kids, there's some kindergartners, we'll make sure they get where they need to go. That sounds good, but when you actually dig into it, which I'm assuming is one of the reasons they're not here, is when you actually dig into it to see whether a child actually has to leave the school and what the money's going to and why do we have to create a portal to do it. Those are the things that for literally 2 years now, very simple questions, I've been trying to get someone to justify why we need to have it. And that'll be a continued justification. So I'm not asking you to do it now because you didn't create any of this mess. That group that's not here now, somebody's going to text me or call me in a little while and say they want to meet, and then we'll start working through it. But understand the information that was needed last year to move this has not changed from this year. And the fact that we're going to continue to double it, that's what members have to look at and go, as you stand still budget, you want to lower income tax, sales tax is rolling off pretty soon, knowing that number is going to continue to double every single year with mixed results at best. I'm not talking about the voucher kids. I'm with Boudreaux on that. We did it. We own them. That's it. That's what we got to cover that. I'm talking about the second round and third rounds that are coming. So that's all. I figure if I asked you,
Yes.
you probably wouldn't have the details, which I didn't expect you to. But the groups that do will reach out, and you and I'll huddle up afterwards when we talk and see where we want to go.
And I think the portion that the governor has been totally supportive of is even if you change the income requirement to include a few more people, the original idea behind voucher and Gator all along was to prevent a student from being trapped into a failing school. We've heard that for so long. There have been the add-ons. It would be curious to see how many applications do you get if you don't offer the add-ons, whether it's tutoring, equipment, whatever the case may be. If it's just somebody trying to leave a failing school, what does that application pool look like?
And I think what we've done is we create a program. We're trying to squeeze kids into it. If you want to take a kid from a failing school and put them in a good school, I don't think many people would object to that. It's all the other stuff that's involved in it that has muddied the water that no one likes to discuss, that people have just difficult justifying. So that's the part we have to work through. But taking a kid from a bad school to a good school, that's good. But they actually have to do it.
Correct.
Like, you can't just give them money to stay in the school they're in now. The goal is for you to get out of the bad school. So we'll work through it. Thank you.
Cool.
All right. I think that's a good way to end.
Good with us. Thank you for being patient, and if we can answer questions going forward, please. This presentation is both on the DOA website and the Office of Planning and Budget website as well, if those that are listening would like to view it. But thank you for your patience.